And I will share my screen back and we can get off and rolling. Okay. All right, so learning outcomes for today. I kind of touched on this already, but why? Why literacy? Why is that something that the SLP needs to be involved in? At the end of last year, I sent all of our SLPs a survey, and it was just really trying to get a pulse on how people felt about literacy. Do we feel like it is within our role? Do we feel like we have the knowledge and experience to be able to share that? Okay. And then the second part of it is the how. How do we intervene? Again, there was a broad range of experiences. So some of you felt like you had a good base. You felt like you had good knowledge. You feel solid and confident in those skills. Some felt that they didn't necessarily have the training in it. So we'll dig into that a little bit today. Also, always a big question for us as SLPs is how do we find the time in the day? This is another thing, I feel like we have such a broad range of skills and knowledge to share with our students and our teachers and others. And so how do we find that time in our day and in our work week? And how do we continue the learning? So why literacy? We'll start there. So back in 2009, the Alliance for Excellent Education found these statistics. I know that's 12 years ago, but I will promise you that they have not changed very much, which is why literacy is coming to the forefront again and hasn't really left because we aren't seeing much movement on it. So 29% of 8th grade public school students met the NAP proficiency for reading. That's the National Something Education Panel. But that's that. If you ever have been in a building that you have the NAP administered, it's just kind of random, but it's a national survey to get a pulse on our public schools and how they're doing. 2% of 8th grade students read at an advanced level, and 25% of students in 4th through 12th grade read below the minimum expectation. So I'm sure some of you have seen this. If not, this is the simple view of reading. So there are a couple different models, and I'll show you each of those models throughout the presentation. But basically, and I feel that we all have this understanding, you first need to be able to decode the text, and then you need to be able to understand the language of the text, and then you're able to gain meaning for reading. I recently sat in a letters training that was really enlightening. And during that, they really stressed the multiplication symbol there. So it's not an addition. It is not an addition equation. It's not a subtraction or anything else, but it is multiplication. So if we are able to decode the text, so we give that 1 point, but we can't understand the text, 0 points, then we're not able to read to gain meaning. On the flip side, if we can't decode the text, as we know some of our students with dyslexia struggle with, but they still can glean some type of meaning from it, they're still not reading to gain meaning. So you really need to have both that decoding and also that comprehension piece in order to gain meaning from it and be an effective reader. Now, if we dig in a little bit deeper, this is that basic reading part, that word recognition down here. Oop. And this top part is the language comprehension. So Scarborough, this is called Scarborough's rope, and he came out with this display in 2001, and it is, I think you'll find it in a lot of places now in the reading literature, and it really talks about it's not just 2 parts. Within those 2 parts, there is so much more that needs to happen. Within language comprehension, students need to have that background knowledge. They need to have the facts, the concepts, just the experiences that they can bring to it, which we know is really important with that inferencing piece. Students need to have vocabulary. They need to have, which of course we know that semantics piece. They need to understand language structures, so syntax, and how to really decode and pull apart all of those syntactical structures. They need to have verbal reasoning and literacy knowledge. But then within the word recognition piece, it isn't just decoding and it isn't just sight recognition. Another key part of that word recognition is the phonological awareness. And we'll be talking throughout today about just how critical the SLP can be within that. So in 2000, the National Reading Panel came out with a big report, and it is referenced a lot throughout the reading literature because it was a pretty alarming note. And so in there it said phonological awareness, especially phonemic awareness, provides children with essential foundational knowledge in the alphabetic system. It is one necessary instruction component within a complete and integrated reading program. And really, if you think about all the steps within reading, the most foundational step there is going to be the phonological awareness component. Again, from that National Reading Panel research study and report in 2000, which was 21 years ago, a lack of phonemic awareness will result in a disabled reader by 3rd grade. And you think about how we teach reading, and a lot of times we're expecting students to be proficient with the decoding piece by 3rd grade. The district is making steps to work on the interventions for those students who are struggling. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that looks like. But just to keep that in mind, if these students are falling behind and then just getting lost and never getting that instruction that they need if they can't read by 3rd grade. Phonological awareness instruction improves students' understanding of how the words in spoken language are represented in print. Phonemic awareness helps students learn to read, helps young students learn to spell and decode words. And I think this is a big point that I'd really like to hit home today, is that phonics is ineffective without first understanding that phonemic awareness. And we'll dig into the difference between phonics and phonemic or phonological awareness in a little bit. So here we go. Why the SLP? These are the results of that survey that I sent out last spring. So first, what do you perceive as the role of the SLP in early reading readiness skill acquisition? We did have 43% say phonological awareness. So you do acknowledge that that is a component that SLPs have knowledge and experience with and expertise. Almost 29% said the semantics piece, which is also part of that Scarborough's rope. 14% said articulation, and 14% gave kind of a non-specific response. The second question was, what do you perceive is the role of the SLP in early identification of students, demonstrating speech and language delays specifically, and the connection to phonemic awareness, phonological processing, and learning to read? So this is more just looking specifically at the students on your caseload. If we have identified them as having a speech and language delay, what's the role of the SLP in identifying any reading weaknesses? And we did have a good portion say phonological awareness intervention, phonological awareness identification. One said intervention if there is a specific language impairment. A couple said they were unsure, and a few said it's not the SLP's role. So then this is the one that I thought was really interesting. When I asked about past experience, training, education, other PD that our SLPs have had, so how prepared do you feel like you are to use that knowledge that you have? 30% said none. So no real experience or training. Like I said, I feel like I was fortunate to land in a program at Truman where there was that heavy emphasis in literacy. I do acknowledge and recognize that not all universities have that same emphasis. I think over the last 16 years, other programs have started to pull that in. So we are seeing SLPs coming out of school with more of that foundation than we have in the past. 55% of people of the SLPs surveyed said a couple classes and maybe a professional development class or some CEUs on it here and there. So that was a good portion too, that have kind of that foundational knowledge. 5% said some experience with interventions. 5% said not on a regular basis. And 5% said regular interventions, that they are part of that regular intervention process as far as foundational literacy. So I would really, moving forward, I would love to see that pink pie piece a lot bigger. So here we are again. If we look at Scarborough's rope, and a skilled reader is using all of those skills, if we really break it down and we look at the language comprehension piece of reading, background knowledge, vocabulary, language structures, verbal reasoning, literacy knowledge, I hear a lot of semantics. I hear a lot of syntax, even some pragmatics there. All of that, I think it's acknowledged. I see it in IEPs that we're writing goals that really target those skills through language. We recognize that students need to have those language skills before they can apply them in reading. But that bottom half of the rope, the word recognition, that's where we really dig in with some of the morphology, the phonics structures, breaking words apart, looking at suffixes, prefixes, all of those extra pieces that go into being an effective and efficient reader, but also that phonological awareness piece. Okay, so in 2010, going back to why is this the role of the SLP? In 2010, ASHA's roles and responsibilities of SLPs in schools and professional issues, they released a statement. And in that statement, it shifted how we look at the role of the school-based SLP. And there were 3 reasons for the updates. First, we were going through an educational reform in 2010. There were legal mandates that were changing, and just our professional practices were evolving. This, when you do get this presentation, this is the link directly to that report. It's a pretty lengthy report, but it was really enlightening, and I think it would be good if you get a few minutes to just read through that and really understand the why behind how our job has evolved in the last 12 years. So first, changing legal mandates. We all know about No Child Left Behind from 2002. In there, it says that students are entitled to highly qualified teachers. So within that statement, they're recognizing that relationship, that correlation between a teacher's knowledge of a subject and student achievement. So they were saying that students are entitled to that highly qualified teacher, a teacher who is confident in what they are teaching, a teacher who is informed and educated in the content that they are teaching students. So really putting an emphasis on that relationship between the teacher's knowledge and what they're expected to teach. We really saw that shake out in the secondary schools where, if you have a certification in math, then you're going to be teaching math. Makes sense, makes perfect sense. In IDEA 2004, all states were required to adopt an RTI or multi-tiered system of support to ensure all students have access to individualized evidence-based instruction. So with that mandate, we were shifting our practices to what we've been doing more recently as far as the interventions. And it's not just students in special education who get that individualized support. It's students who are struggling, students who we identify who haven't mastered the foundational skills. They can still have access to that individualized evidence-based instruction. It doesn't need to be special ed gets the extra support, and if you're in gen ed, you don't. As of 2004, that's where we came in with the tiers and RTI and all of that. Evolving professional practices. So I'll just read this quote straight off from the ASHA policy statement still that I referenced. Several professional practices may now be included as part of the SLP's workload that were not a typical part of their work when the 2000 ASHA guidelines were published. These areas include work with students who are medically fragile, work with those with dysphagia, work with reading, writing, and curriculum, evidence-based practices, RTI, and telepractice. So obviously we're really focusing on that reading, writing, and curriculum, but that is a statement that's directly from the ASHA policy in 2010. I mentioned that SLPs have an integral role in education and are essential members of that school team. And I think this is done in a variety of ways across the district currently, and even across schools throughout the country. SLPs really do have just, a unique learning set. We have just a special expertise in that language that we can analyze and really plan to address those linguistic and metalinguistic weaknesses that we identify. We can ensure educational relevance by addressing the personal, social, emotional, academic, and vocational needs impacting education. And we can really highlight that language and literacy. We really understand that relationship between language processes and how that impacts listening, speaking, reading, writing. When you get into some of those conversations with teachers, it's just really neat to delve in and ask the questions and come down to the why and what's really that foundational weakness that's lagging that we can develop an intervention plan for. The range of responsibilities from that 2010 policy. SLPs help students meet the performance standards of a particular school district and state. So it's our job to look at prevention, assessment, and intervention. So as a result, our service delivery model and workload model have evolved over time. If you think about what an SLP's job looked like in 2000, probably looks different than what it looked like in 2010, and even looks very different from what our jobs are looking like now. Making sure that it's that balance, that we're not still just pulling students into our classrooms and sending them back to their rooms on their ways, and not leaving our space to be able to share what our experience is with the students. We should not be working in isolation anymore, and we should really be an active part of that team, not just the IEP team, but also that problem-solving team and process. Which leads into this one, collaboration. So SLPs work in partnership with others to meet students' needs. So along with other school professionals, SLPs can provide services to support school programs, support instructional strategies, complement and supplement other professionals with unique training and skill sets. So I have been hitting the SLP's role hard, but again, I do not mean this to be just an overwhelming one more thing. It's just us. We're the only ones. That is not my message at all. It's that you are one important cog within that wheel to really help students. And we'll talk a little bit more about the how in a bit, but just keeping in mind that along with other school professionals, SLPs can be an important piece. So we can be working in partnership with others to really identify and meet those students' needs. Leadership. I think if you've had any conversations with me over the last few years, I've been harping the advocacy piece, which I think is why I've been so passionate about the first part of this presentation, is just that, again, that unique skill set. So SLPs are not just advocates for students, but also can be advocates for teachers and teachers' knowledge, other school professionals, administrators, support personnel, families, community, but also advocating to all of those people about what best practice looks like, about just certain strategies and therapy techniques that we do that we don't even think twice about, in really helping others understand those so that they can help students as well. So within leadership, SLPs provide direction in defining their roles and responsibilities and in ensuring the delivery of appropriate services to students. Okay, I'm going to pause there real quick and just check in. I don't see any questions in the chat, but if anybody has one, if you wanted to type it in the chat. Amanda will continue to monitor that chat, and I also have it pulled up so I can see it in case anybody has something. But we'll keep moving. We are moving pretty well through this, or I am, since it's kind of a one-sided presentation. Again, I apologize for that. So hopefully that'll give us some time towards the end for questions and answers. And again, just put them in the chat if you have any throughout. So the National Institute of Child Health and Human Development in 2000 recognized 5 competencies that are essential to effective reading instruction. Just bringing this up again, really looking at the phonological awareness, then the phonics, then the fluency, the vocabulary, and the comprehension. And it really is something that builds upon itself. Without one, we cannot have the next. So Louisa Moats is a big researcher currently, heavily involved in the LETTERS program, if you've heard about that, and other reading research. And she said teacher knowledge in phonetics, phonology, phonics, and morphology is limited. And so when you think about it, when we take a step back, and we think about the coursework that we went through, we had coursework in speech science, phonetics, or TIC, phonology, language development, and those were just the first ones that popped into my head. We have training in transcription. I remember vividly just sitting there, just really honing in on the sounds, thinking about sounds. How do I break it out? How many sounds is that word? You know, with the professor up front, and the final is her talking and we're transcribing everything she's saying. And just in the day-to-day therapy that you've been doing for, since you've been working as a professional, you are constantly honing in on those sounds and really listening for what's going on with those sounds. We also have training in cultural and linguistic differences. So I remember that being a part of, felt like every class that we took, that there was always a chapter where we touched on cultural and linguistic differences. So just that training, that coursework, and just that day-to-day practice that we do really gives, it's helped, I think, change the wiring in our brains where we are hearing and listening for those sounds as almost second nature now. I roomed with several students in college, or several roommates, friends, who were in education. So they came out to be teachers, and the only class that we ever had together out of all of this was a phonetics class if they chose to take it. And so the ones who were looking more at going into, you know, getting a major in English so that they could be English teachers, they had that phonetics class if they wanted it, but it was not required. So really, when we look at all of that knowledge and background that we have, it's vastly different from what your typical teacher is coming out of school with, looking at that phonetics, phonology, phonics, and morphology. So around the district, there's been a huge push and emphasis on the science of reading. There was, well, I can read through it, but just this summer, just in the past month, there was a LETTERS training that was open to any K through 5 gen ed or special ed teacher if they wanted to be part of that. I think that's today, actually. I was part of an administrator training a couple weeks ago. There was a Wilson reading training, K-12. That is just the SPED teachers, but we do now have a Wilson reading teacher in each of the buildings. And then there's also a level 1 Wilson training that some teachers have elected to do. That's a pretty in-depth training. It will take place over the course of the year, and I believe they even get college credit for it because of the intensity of that training. So more and more we are putting that message out there that there is more to reading than just the decoding and the comprehension. There really is a science to it. As part of the letters training, they go in depth on just the brain and the synapses and the different sections that are activated when you have an efficient reader. So there was also a science of reading training specific, and that was K-12 that was offered on PD Day last year. This year, Mrs. Sanker is starting a phonics study in 8 of the elementary schools. iReady is an intervention program that is used from 6th grade through 12th grade now this year. Achieve 3000 is a 6th through 12th grade reading intervention, and 6th through 12th for special education. That's a program that they use at that level. Haggerty, I know you've probably heard if you've been in the district, but that's kindergarten and 1st grade this year. And Bridge the Gap for phonological awareness interventions is going to be 2nd grade through 5th grade. So I'm really excited to see that we are building that emphasis up to 4th and 5th grade because I feel like that was something that we had not seen before. So I think you should, but Science of Reading the Community is an excellent Facebook group. If you wanted to join that, just to hear the different conversations that are happening regarding reading. And then Voyager Surprise is a great website too. They have blogs that you can listen to that will help you with some of that continuing learning if you feel like you still need more information after that. So just again, it's not all on the SLP. The district is making a strong effort towards training both special education teachers, general education teachers, our reading specialists, even making sure that we all understand that Scarborough's rope essentially, and just how the brain works when reading. Still around the district, assessments that will be occurring this year. They will continue with the DRA. Haggerty looks at some of those phonological awareness skills in kindergarten and 1st grade. Galileo assessments will continue. Those are aligned more to the state standards. Phonics First is an intervention program. Again, that's more phonics based. That's not so much the phonological awareness. And new this year is Acadians, which will be kindergarten through 3rd grade, which will help teachers identify where some of those reading weaknesses exist.
Katie, did you see the question from Liz in the chat?
I did not. No. What is that question?
She's asking, is there any guidance on what the SLP role looks like at the high school level? That they've had some students come in with phonemic and phonological awareness difficulties and still cannot read and or analyze the text.
Right. Are those, well, and I think that's something that we can continue to talk about in the SLP PLCs, because that was something too, as I was going through this and getting this all prepared, I was thinking, like, how does this look in the secondary level? In the elementary, we have that problem-solving team. It's established in all of the buildings. There are steps, there are opportunities throughout the day, just with the nature of the schedule at the elementary level, where it's a little more natural and easier to work that in. But what I think it's going to come down to at the secondary is the SLP being the advocate in that situation and talking through with a team of people, how can we make this happen? What does the student need? Now, if it's an IEP situation where it's in there as a goal and the SLP is working with the student, it's a lot easier because you already have those minutes in there. But as far as the intervention piece, we can talk through, I have some slides coming up where we can talk through different options about implementation. But it's going to be a bigger challenge, I feel like, at that secondary level, and something that as a team, we can continue to talk through that PLC process this year too. Thank you. For some reason that didn't pop up in my chat. So keep me posted, Amanda. So the how. First, we're going to talk a little bit about what phonological awareness is, and then we'll move into what does this look like in the day-to-day. And what I want you to think about throughout this is, yeah, how can I make this work in my building? Each of our buildings have different structures as far as who's involved in that problem-solving team. At the secondary, we're still kind of building that problem-solving team. But who can I pull in? How can I get support for this? And how can we most effectively support students? So we must first focus on understanding and awareness of sounds before children can understand the connection between sounds and letters. So really trying to separate and pull apart what is the difference between phonics and phonological awareness. When we look at phonics, we're talking orthographics or letters. Mastery of phonics skills is decoding, and it's a visual skill. There is a visual component to phonics, and it's where we learn all those rules. I before E, except after C, all of that. Students are really analyzing also when they're looking at phonics, word endings, root words, how to pull words apart and break it down so that they're not, overwhelmed by just the size of a word. Now, when we talk about phonological awareness, the phonological comes back to the phoneme, which we all know means sounds. So mastery of phonological awareness skills equates more to pre-reading and pre-literacy skills. And the practice is all auditory. So not focusing on letters, instead of talking about letters, we're talking about sounds. What sound do you hear at the end of cat? And we'll go through and practice some of these. So here's the phonological awareness roadmap. We start with rhyming, if you're doing the phonological awareness part. Then we go down to counting, blending, separating, isolating, and manipulating. And we'll talk a little bit more about what each of those is. So rhyming should really be solid by age 5. So you figure kindergarten, right? Students should be able to discriminate which words do not rhyme in a group of words. So cat, bat, dog, rat. They should be able to hear that difference. They should be able to receptively identify a rhyming word if we're scaffolding that rhyming skill. So what rhymes with cat, rat, or dog? And they should be able to generate too, which would obviously out of those 3 things be the most complex thing to do. Tell me a word that rhymes with cat. Next, we talk about counting, and that's more counting syllables. Counting phonemes could be a little bit closer to 6, but how many parts in the word basketball do you hear? Basketball. And really, again, we're not talking letters, we're talking sounds. So anything abstract that you can use as a tactile or a manipulative support will be good when you're doing the therapy or modeling it or showing someone else how to implement it. Counting phonemes, again, sounds. So how many sounds in lake? We're going a, k. As I was sitting in the letters training, it was interesting to hear the discussion and to see some of the facial reactions to the emphasis on sounds, which is part of that letters training in that program, is that it's a different way for adults to be thinking about teaching reading. So they hadn't previously, or maybe they had touched on it or had some exposure to it, but it hasn't been an emphasis in the reading instruction, especially when you get to the upper elementary. So again, really focusing on the sounds, a, k. So practice at this point. I wish I could get more feedback from you guys, but I want you to take a couple minutes and see if you can just go through and count the sounds. Just do a quick little refresher. How many sounds do we hear in does? You want to just make a note in front of you. See how your skills are, if you're keeping them up. Does. Anybody want to put it into the chat? Are you able to, let's see, chat to all attendees, or is it just a chat to me or Amanda?
Now, it is set up that they have a Q&A panel
Okay.
on the side that I can see. That's where Liz's question came through. So I'm not sure if you see that, or maybe you have it collapsed and don't have it open.
Aha, there it is. Okay. Can they see each other's questions then?
I think everybody can see what we put in the Q&A. If someone can confirm that they saw Liz's question. I do see something else came up in the actual chat though,
Okay.
from Brianna Newton.
Okay, good. Yeah, Brianna was able to switch it to all panelists instead of privately. So that way you guys can see what you're all responding. Thank you. So yeah, most people are saying 3 for does. Pretty easy one. How about teacher? How many sounds do we hear in teacher? So we have that each, 4. How about show? Any guesses for sounds in the word show? Yeah, so show, and I'm going to show you in a second what some of the teachers responded or how many of them were accurate, but show can be a tricky one because we have that extra, some people want to, instead of just saying sh, oh, we hear sh, oh, and they throw that w on the end, and so that can be deceptive and tricky. So far, you guys have been 100% accurate, by the way. Here we go, knuckle. Any guesses on knuckle? Lots of 4s coming in. K, l. How about quick? Getting a little trickier here. Not for you pros. Okay, so quick would be k, w, I, k. 4. Box. It's another one. B, a, s, box. 4 sounds, 3 letters. So a lot of times I hear teachers respond 3. They put that x together. Fuse. That's my favorite sneaky sound in there. Fuse is another 4. Y, oo, z. Okay. So great job, 100% for everyone who participated. Thank you. So here we go. These are our answers. Does has 3, z. Teacher 4, t, each, and so on. I think we went through the rest of those. So excellent job, everybody. Now, when you looked at percentage correct, and this is from a study in 2008 from Spencer, Shuley, Gio, and Lee, they grouped these words into easy words and hard words. And with the easy words, SLPs were like 92 to 96% accurate. Teachers, not too poor, 83, 84% accurate. Hard words, you could see even fuse, probably that tricky "y" in there. But definitely the percentages drop here. And I just take it back to that training where we are just so honed in on the sounds all the time, and have that extra practice that it's just kind of becomes second nature. So moving on in our continuum of phonological awareness skills, then we have blending, which should be mastered by age 6. Again, we're not blending letters, we're blending sounds and syllables. So what word do you hear? Bass, get, ball, and have them blend that all together. Blending phonemes, b, a, s, e, t, b, a, u. And that's a long one. So wouldn't start with that. Not at age 6. Separating, that should be by age 5. So starting with bigger chunks like compound words, then moving into 2-syllable words, 3-syllable words, and so on. So if we're asking them to separate the parts of beautiful, they can break it down. Beautiful. Then we move into the smaller parts, the sounds. This is where it starts to get tricky, I think, which is what we were just doing, isolating those sounds. So what is the first sound you hear in cat? We're not looking for a letter, looking for a sound. So what's the first sound? And then being really careful too that we're not saying ka or ta, which I know we've all had that lecture from a professor at some point in time. What's the last sound? What's the middle sound? So similar to our tick therapy, it's going to be easiest to identify initially. And then we'll move into final sounds. And then finally, we'll be in the medial sounds. Also, a next step even beyond medial sounds would be really pulling apart those blends. So in stop, what's the second sound you hear in stop? Or what's the first sound? Do they say st? Or can they break apart? And then you get into those tricky ones like the x, pulling that, because in their head, they might know that's an X. They might be thinking letter instead of sound and not hearing that as k. Manipulating. So adding sounds, again, looking initial, then final, then medial. So the practice or the strategy might be, okay, add the sound k to the beginning of at. What do you have? Or, yeah, and then they would come up with cat. Deleting sounds. Again, moving initial, then final, then medial. Say cat without saying k. What do you have? At. And then substituting sounds. Say bat, now change b to k. And what do you have? Cat. So just some tips and reminders when working on phonological awareness with students, really focus on the sounds. Repetition is key, even in small increments. So this is a perfect thing to do in a speedy speech model. Pick one skill. You don't have to run through the whole phonological awareness continuum. Pick one skill. Do a quick drill on it for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, send them back. Just really trying to hone in on getting the students to think about what are the sounds. Use visual and tactile cues. So it can be tapping, it can be clapping, it can be moving something like a token. It can be drawing symbols on a whiteboard. Just a lot of options there, but again, really making sure to isolate those sounds when you're doing it, and tapping through those is going to be the most effective. Scaffold that instruction by changing the number of phonemes. You can do those blends, those tricky sounds in words. So we can scaffold by changing the target location in the word. So like I said, you can mess with the difficulty by changing the location if it's initial, final, medial, by throwing in blends, or some of those quiet sounds like infuse. You can, also the length of the word, obviously would be a good one. So 95% group, they're also an excellent current resource if you want to find them. But the 95% groups, they have a basic phonological awareness continuum, and you can see that progression from simple to more complex as we stair step. So looking at words in a sentence, then getting smaller, syllables, onset and rhyme. So k, at, phonemes, and then within the phonemes, all of those skills that we just went through. This is another continuum that they have, is just a visual, which I like to see too, because I think it helps us understand that progression and where a student's level of mastery is and where that breakdown comes into play. So you will have this as a resource too when I share this with you. And then this is a new one that I was just that I just saw, and I really liked this visual of word reading development as well. So when we think about pre-alphabetic, sorry, we're looking at just those general concepts of print. So my 5-year-old is not quite affluent, she's not quite reading yet. However, she knows when she sees McDonald's, she recognizes a stop sign. She likes to tell me that the letters, she likes to tell me how to spell stop when we come up to a stop sign, because she recognizes the letters, but she's not reading that word or truly spelling the word stop yet, but she recognizes that that visual represents something. Early alphabetic, knowing some letter names, some letter sounds, some early phonological or phonemic awareness skills, such as that onset rhyme, which I said, like, onset is just that first sound in a word, rhyme is the rest of the word. So in pet, we'd have et, bin would be b, in, and then some initial phoneme matching if they can hear, the first sound in the word dog and dad are the same. They can recognize that those two words, dog and dad, start with the same sound. Later alphabetic would be the start of some automatic sight word recognition, mostly the regular ones, but maybe a few irregulars. Initial set of phoneme grapheme correspondences, and then some basic phoneme awareness with segmentation and blending of just 3 to 4 phoneme words. So not getting too crazy. Street actually has 5, so I just noticed that. That's maybe not the best example there. Consolidated alphabetic, that's when we start to get more complex. So increasing with that automatic sight word recognition, start to have some of that orthographic mapping, making those connections between phonemes and graphemes that are even more complex, looking at word families, morphemes, patterns, and then advanced phoneme awareness. So you're also looking at those bigger words. And like I said, being able to break those words apart into syllables, starting to understand what some of those rules are as far as an open syllable ends in a vowel, a closed syllable ends in a consonant. Okay, so I think this is Liz, know really how. Okay, so I got that. I've understood the phonological awareness, or that was a good refresher on the phonological awareness, but how do I do this in my day? Do we have any questions over phonological awareness, phonemic awareness, phonics, over what we just kind of went over before we go into the the how do we do it. Okay. Right. So again, just going back to that 2021 survey that we did at the end of the year, what I heard or what I read from the group was a lack of confidence as far as knowledge of the phonological awareness. So hopefully what we went through and just that reassurance that you do have that skill base, you do have that skill set. And if you need resources, please reach out. I'd be happy to share them, but also look within your buildings too. Talk to your special ed teachers, talk to your gen ed teachers. They are all coming out of these trainings at the beginning of the school year with, not all of them, but those who participated in them with some additional resources too. So I think just take this opportunity to open that conversation and see what is happening in your building or what will be happening in your building and how can you be a part of that. Communication about student concerns with teachers, counselors, PST. I know we talked a lot about that last year as far as I still feel like I'm isolated. I feel like I'm an island. People don't reach out to me or, so just really working on that communication piece within your building, talking with the counselors, talking with the teachers, your administrator. How can I help the PST, which is that problem solving team? And if you don't have a PST in your building, like at some of the secondaries, just really having that conversation with the counselors or with the English department, if they're struggling, how can we work together with this? Also, I think that frustration that there's not a vague, well-defined intervention process. Again, I think at the elementary, it's always a work in progress. The secondary, that poses a little bit more of a challenge just because of the nature of the day and just the size of the buildings. So really just communication. Again, I keep coming back to that. And how can we work through this? And it might take you as the SLP being an advocate for that piece within your building. And then the workload, which I know is always going to be a concern. And it's just that, how do we work harder, not smarter? I take that back. How do we work smarter, not harder? So practice at the top of the license is something that I came across a lot over the summer as I was looking into this more and trying to think about how do we make this efficient and effective without it straining the SLPs, without it becoming one more thing that is causing stress, because the need is there and your expertise is there. So how do we make this work? And I kept coming across this phrase, practice at the top of the license. And this is from McNeely in 2018. So finally, something new. You think about the role of the SLP. The role is to assess individuals, provide skilled intervention, consult with colleagues regarding functional goals and treatment options, supervising support personnel, providing education or professional development on challenging and emerging practice strategies, and working with clients and their families on self-management. So there is a lot in there. But I think what we need to think about is, how can I effectively do all of those things? We'll keep moving. So also, if you're practicing at the top of the license, you're also part of that education, consultation, and collaboration within the professionals in your building. Increasing the phonological awareness skill of all the educators. So this does not need to all fall on the SLP, but some people might need some of the information that you have. And how can you help support that so that they can get to 22 kids in their classroom? Design materials to enhance educators' efforts to provide effective phonological awareness instruction. So either finding the resources, gathering the resources, but sharing those out, making sure that everybody has those. And support the PST through the early literacy assessment and intervention piece. So really asking those guiding questions. When I was at the elementary, there were days, I mean, obviously me as an SLP, but we'd pull in the building SLPs as well and say, help us problem solve this. What is going on with this student? Because I think, you know, you have that background knowledge where you can ask some deeper questions and really dig into where is the breakdown there. And once you identify where that breakdown is, then we can start to collaborate as a team and problem solve. Okay, what are our next steps? If we're practicing at the top of the license too, we're considering the 3 tiers of support that we've all become so familiar with. So tier 1 is core classroom instruction. So thinking about what can my role as an SLP be to support the core classroom instruction. Tier 2 might be more targeted small group instruction. Again, we might not be at the point of a direct student SLP connection, but if that weakness has been identified, how can I as the SLP support the team, support the person providing those interventions? And then tier 3, of course, is that intensive individual intervention. So here we'll dig into those tiers a little bit further. Tier 1, if you think about it, is more a design model coach type of support as the SLP. So providing that professional development to the gen ed teachers, the reading specialists, the SPED teachers, and thinking too within your building, take a second, take a step back, take a breath, and think, how can I do that? It doesn't need to be a full faculty meeting presentation. That might not be the most effective method of getting that out there. Maybe start with a couple teachers who you know are open to it or who are, you know, seeking support in their, you know, foundational reading instruction. And just having those conversations, providing them those resources. Collaborate with school teams to share your knowledge of language development, phonological awareness, vocabulary, sentence structure, comprehension. And teaching the educators within your buildings to think beyond print. I think so much we want to rush that. We want to leap to the phonics rules. We want to leap to teaching them what the words are on the paper and teaching them how to read the words on paper. But if our students are coming to us without that solid foundation of sounds, then we're only shooting ourselves in the foot by trying to rush that other piece. So teaching them it's okay to take a step back and just really hone in on those sounds, and it will pay off. Still in that tier 1 design model coach, what can that look like? Collaborating with the PST to identify and develop that intervention plan. So helping them dig in, helping them identify where on that continuum is the student falling apart, or, you know, maybe getting in there and talking with the kid for a few minutes and having them run through a couple skills, seeing if you can get a feel for that, and then helping them develop that plan and provide that intervention. You can model lessons. Sometimes I think just teachers hearing you go through it, also making sure that it's, you know, being clear about in box, it's not b-ox, it's b-ox. I think that's going to take some training and some adjusting to really make sure that they're able to pull out those sounds individually. You know, co-teaching a few lessons, getting into the classroom and running through something with the teacher, that might be fun. It doesn't need to be a year-long intervention, but it could just be a, hey, let's try this out. And then you can model that a little bit. If we move into tier 2, then that might be a little bit more support from the SLP as far as consulting, coaching for those students who are not responding to the tier 1 intervention. So in this, you're going to collaborate a little bit further with the PST, troubleshooting, revising intervention plans. You know, maybe we're overshooting the target. Maybe the student's not making progress with their intervention plan because we haven't dug deep enough yet. And so we need to take a couple steps back on the continuum and start at a little more basic level and helping them identify that and move forward with that. Again, modeling, co-teaching, and then, every time we go up a step in the tier, we're looking at increasing that scope, intensity, and duration of that intervention plan. So instead of it being 5 minutes a couple times a week, now maybe we're looking at 5 minutes every day. Maybe instead of doing this, and I don't mean the SLP, but whoever is providing that intervention, maybe instead of it being, a small group intervention with 5 or 6 kids, now we're looking at honing in on 2 students for that. So just adjusting that scope, intensity, and duration. Okay, so a few notes on co-teaching. I know I attempted it a few times when I was doing therapy in the classroom. And it was exciting. It was unnerving. It was fun. It was different. I was used to pulling my small groups of 3, 4, or 5 kids, and now I'm going into a classroom with 20. But when done well, it can be very effective. So co-teaching is just that collaboration with the teacher. It is research proven. It really supports generalizing these skills in a natural setting, and it supports the teacher's education and their knowledge moving forward as well. So I would really strongly encourage that if you have that opportunity. What co-teaching should not be an extra set of hands, should not be one person teaching all of it and another one being an assistant. It's not turn-based teaching. It's not extra plan time for one or the other. That co-teacher is not a secretary or a gopher or a place for kids who could benefit from 2 students or 2 teachers. It really is, when it's done well, can be done well, super effective and a lot of fun for the teacher and the students. So there are a variety of models. I've seen 5 models, 7 models, 8 models. I think it's all just kind of how you look at it and how you group them within. So the one that I think makes the most sense to me is the 5 models of co-teaching. So there is one-to-one, where one teaches and one drifts. There's duo teaching, which is 2 teachers teaching simultaneously. There's station teaching, parallel teaching, and targeted teaching. We're going to talk a little bit more about these. So if you're looking at the one teach, one drift model, again, it's not that one is just kind of drifting around and checking things out. That drifter needs to have a purpose, and that purpose can be to observe. So maybe there are a couple students that you're collecting data on and you just want to kind of do a quiet assessment. You can do that. If it's, just the teacher needs somebody to observe the student and say, hey, what's going on? I'm having a hard time pinpointing this. Then we can be observing for something specific there. But it's not just to hang in the back of the room or just kind of drift around and see what needs. It needs to be a very intentional drifting. Like I said, could be assessing. So while the teacher is modeling the lesson, the drifter could be wandering or could be moving around the room and collecting data just over the student's shoulders so that we have baseline or progress, formative assessments. And then that drifter could also be assisting students as questions arise, but being very intentional if that's the model that's chosen, that both are actively engaged with the students. Duo or 2 teaching would be team teaching. So really collaborating and working together. And when I've seen this done well, it's been very fluid. It's been 2 teachers who have been teaching together for, most of the year, and they can read each other and they bounce off each other, and it's just fabulous to see. It could be a debate style. So more modeling the questioning and the answers and just that back and forth. Also with duo teachers, it could be that second teacher is there as a clarification. So I have seen this too with SLPs when they're in the gen ed classroom and the classroom teacher is teaching. There might be a vocabulary word that is thrown out there in the SLP, sees on the faces because they're just a second adult in that room, whoa, I think there's something missing here. And so then they can jump in and clarify what that vocabulary is, model it, demonstrate it, break it down, do all of those things. And then duo teaching both can be presenting as well. So if we look at station teaching, these are going to be smaller groups, homogeneous as far as skill. So you would probably, in this situation, you'd have students who are maybe more at a foundational level of phonological awareness, maybe students who are more into that phonics piece, or students who are reading fluently. But you would do small groups and they would all be of the same skill level so that you could really target the skills. And then when you station teach, you could have, okay, so the SLP is going to do the phonological awareness instruction. Maybe the classroom teacher is going to be doing the phonics instruction. And then maybe we have some students working independently who are working more on that fluency or working in pairs or something to that effect. So setting up those stations around the room. And then so as you can see in that example, that's a good way to really integrate those supports and focus on whatever those lagging skills are specific to that small group of students. With parallel teaching, you're looking more at combination groups. So you wouldn't have the PA group and the phonics group and the fluency group. You would have all of those students combined, and you would have them in 2 separate groups. And you would have the SLP instructing one and the teacher. They would be teaching the same lesson. And then it's also, it's just more effective as far as keeping students' attention. That's really the benefit there, but it would be the same content, same information, but you're just able to keep the students' attention a little bit better. Targeted teaching, also great for that specialized instruction. So if the teacher is working with most of the class, and then we are pulling a small group of students to the back to really work on a targeted specific skill, that could be an option. Okay, so now if we move into tier 3, which is the direct instruction, we have multiple service delivery models for this. This is what we do every day. So we're familiar with this. When we're looking at service delivery, we're considering the setting. Of course, we want to be least restrictive. When you look at ASHA policy and practice, they also stress the most natural environment. So when we think about setting for students in a school building, is it the most natural setting? And is that going to work effectively for us if we are pulling students out all the time? Maybe that's what the student needs because of the degree of their disability. So it could be the most natural and the most effective setting for them. But there's also that other piece of, or is it more natural for them to be, if they're more looking at carryover, being on the playground or in the cafeteria or in their classroom. So really considering all of the, I guess, the range that we can with the setting when we're considering service delivery. Dosage, of course. So what's our frequency, intensity, and duration? Does the student need to be seen for 5 minutes at a time? 15 minutes? Do they need 30 or 45 minutes? What is most appropriate for them? So making sure that we're adjusting that as well, and that it's not just a standard 30, 60, 90, 2 times, 3 times a week, that type of thing. Format, of course. So are we seeing them one-on-one? Are we seeing them in a group? Is it more a consultation basis where you're supporting the teacher in monitoring a student or providing the teacher some additional support and strategies? But really considering that format, seeing if, this student's doing really well one-on-one or two-on-one, I want to see how they do in a bigger group. So making sure that we're adjusting that too. And then the provider, again, direct instruction, if we're talking interventions, tier 3 interventions, does not necessarily need to be the SLP. It could be the reading specialist. It could be another teacher in the building, just depending on how your problem-solving team and your interventions are set up within your building. So lots of variables there that we can adjust to provide a little more direct instruction. Also, there's that blast schedule that's like the speedy speech, quick and intense. Or this was an interesting one that I came across that I had never really thought about, is a block schedule, where maybe you see a student one day for 60 minutes, but the first 30 minutes you pull out and you are front loading whatever that skill or lesson or information is going to be in the classroom. And then you push in for the last 30 minutes to see how they do with generalizing that skill. Now, I understand that schedules are probably mostly set by this point, and that it's difficult to make those adjustments throughout the year. But I just want to challenge you this year to maybe think outside the box a little bit and think about, how can I really practice at the top of the license? How can I share my knowledge, my expertise with the others in the buildings so that we can impact more students? I think when we kind of pull back into our own, then we are really only helping those kids that we are seeing. And if we also want to look at, is this the best for them? Is this the most natural environment? Is seeing them one-on-one or two-on-one going to be as effective as seeing them, you know, in a group of 3 or maybe 4, or seeing them in a different environment? What do they need, and what adjustments can we make throughout the year? So last thing I want to end on, and then open it up to questions, is this quote from 1973, which again, is a very long time ago. But it was, "Our unique contribution to the educational team can be the analysis of speech, language, and auditory learning upon which further symbolic and academic skills are built." So even back in 1973, SLPs were acknowledging we have a specific skill set, and it is not just to occur in our rooms. We need to share that, and we need to be practicing at that top of the license and sharing that with our colleagues throughout the building. And how can we best do that? So I hope, as I said at the beginning, and as I'm, you know, a couple times throughout, my intention is not to stress or overwhelm. I just want to challenge you that at this time, how can I further support all students in the building? And how can we think differently about our role with collaboration and support? It's not that now the SLP is going to be providing every phonological awareness intervention for every kid who needs it throughout the building. It's going to be, how can I empower others around me and provide that knowledge and that education to be a contributing part of that team? So like I said, I will share this with you. These references are great if you are curious and you want to further your learning. I also encourage you to find that 95% group, find that Voyager Surprise, and the Science of Reading community within Facebook. So, okay, what questions? Do we have questions? Comments, thoughts? Okay, I will hang on here. I will, I'll try this again, where I'm going to unmute all participants. So if you are still on here, please mute yourself. But I'm giving you the power to unmute and mute.
Star Wars Hero cards.
Hey, Katie.
Yes.
Hey, it's Shane. I had posted a question a bit ago, but I don't know.
Only man who works
If
here.
it's
You don't
showing up
even have to
correctly.
say that. Shane Kepler.
Okay. Hold on one second, Shane. If you are
Okay.
not Shane, can you please mute? There we go.
Get unmuted.
I'm trying to go through and see if I can manually mute those who are not quite muted yet. Right, now it's letting me do it. It did not let me do this before. Okay, Shane, go ahead. What's your question?
Yeah, Katie, I mean, it really seems to me like in kindergarten, we're pushing the reading development part in the curriculum. And gee, I'm not sure it's developmentally appropriate a lot of the time. So when we talk to teachers, when you were saying, talk about backing up, and it's okay to work on that auditory component first, my question is, how do we assure them that it's okay to do that when they're worried about how this child looks on assessments? You know, where that's the drive to make this this progress in phonics as opposed to phonemic awareness.
Well, I think it's just going back to that continuum in that visual that the 95% group had. It's really a stair-step thing. So it's going to be very difficult for that student, and it's the science of reading. We can't put, you know, phonics in front of phonological awareness until they have that skill mastered, or it's just going to be a battle and you're going to continue to hit your head against a wall with it. Now, it can't be done. I mean, it can be done at the same time. They can still be exposed to that curriculum and still be working on the phonics, but we need to be looking at, is there another time that we can pull out and do those interventions to really focus on the sounds and help that student grow with the rhyming, just that sound awareness. I know there's all kinds of research too that we always learn about that magic window until they turn age 5, and making sure that we're really capitalizing on those sounds. So our students who maybe don't have the language exposure, or, you know, aren't read the nursery rhymes at home and don't hear all of those sounds and don't get all of that wordplay, they are going to be coming in with that lagging skill if they can't naturally just pick it up on their own. So it's a gap that is recognized, that is there. And hopefully throughout all of the efforts with the district push towards the science of reading, towards letters, towards Wilson reading, really helping to draw and increase that awareness of the role of phonological awareness, that'll be something that will evolve. I don't think that's something that can fall all the way on the SLP's shoulders by any means, but again, just being one more team member, one more person to bring awareness to that important piece of reading.
Okay, thanks.
What other questions? I'm going to pull up the screen again so that you're not looking at my face. Amanda, was there anything else in the chat that I missed? Or in the Q&A?
No, and sorry, Shane, I must have missed yours. But no, I don't see anything else.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, thank you everybody for your time.
Katie?
Yes.
I'm sorry, this is Megan Kim. Can I just ask a quick question too?
Yeah, for sure. We have time.
Okay, so this is just for interventions, correct?
Tell me more.
So I guess I've always questioned like the appropriateness of writing goals in the IEP for students for phonological awareness. You know, so because we never really, like, for our language kiddos, we don't really have a lot of tests. Like, I think currently we are doing more phonological awareness testing. I feel like I've seen a lot more of that, but previously I've not done phonological awareness goals for my students. I kind of target it on the side sometimes, but would it be okay to start writing some of those for our students who struggle and kind of work alongside with the special education teachers, if that's something that they also work on? Or would this more be focused on just interventions?
No, I think if the IEP team has the data, if you've done those assessments and you've identified that phonological awareness is a lagging skill, then it is definitely appropriate to write an IEP goal for that, for improving phonological awareness skills. And that can be something that, yeah, like you said, maybe the special education teacher is implementing part of it or doing some of that, or maybe it's something where you're dividing and conquering and the SLP is going to be providing that phonological awareness instruction so that the special education teacher can focus more on that phonics piece, just depending on the appropriateness of the student's age, their reading level, where those deficits are. But we have been starting to put phonological awareness goals into IEPs, so definitely appropriate. We have had an increase in advocates also asking for that on behalf of parents because of this push, just all of the information that we're learning about dyslexia and students with dyslexia and how their language deficits sometimes fall into that phonological awareness area. So we have had teachers and advocates come in and asking, why are we not writing goals when it is clear that the student has that deficit in phonological awareness? So if it always comes down to the data, so if the IEP team has that data, whether it's through interventions that have been attempted or through a formal test like the phonological awareness test or CTAP, then it is definitely appropriate to put a goal in there.
Hey, Katie, it's Kapler again. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. Stop apologizing, Shane.
I haven't been in any meetings yet, evaluation meetings, reporting results where we've had a report on phonemic awareness. Is that going to become a standard part of the diagnostic testing that our SLPs are doing?
It does not necessarily need to be the SLP administering that assessment. It can be. If you're looking at the CTAP or the phonological awareness test, I would encourage it to be the SLP doing that. I know some of our diagnostic, not some of them, our diagnostic SLPs have used some of those assessments when the situation is appropriate. This most recent version of the Wyatt 4, has a whole dyslexia screening section, and it has an emphasis on phonological awareness. Also, if you're building ED or examiner or using the KTEA 3, it also has a phonological awareness piece. So if you are sitting in that red meeting and you're hearing a lot about concerns with the reading decoding, it will be a good idea, again, just to be an advocate for that student, be an advocate for your role and your experience and expertise to say, hey, might be a good idea if we take a peek at the phonological awareness aspect. It's not a required subtest on either the KTEA or the Wyatt 4. However, it is a subtest that is available, and the EDs will be using that Wyatt 4 more increasingly moving forward, and they have received training on it and they have been practicing it over the past year. So that would be an excellent opportunity for you to really encourage that digging deeper to get more information.
I'm so sorry. Yeah, I know now I'm apologizing too. I feel like our ED has administered the CTAP. Should it be recommended that the SLP administer that, or is it okay for our ED to administer it?
I believe EDs can administer it, but also a lot of our EDs are SLPs, so they have that background.
I know mine isn't.
Okay, so that might just be a conversation if they are comfortable with that. And what their experience is, because I think there's
reading specialist, and I was kind of confused why she was reporting on it, but I just kind of let it go.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that would just be an individualized thing, because my only hesitancy there, if you've ever administered the CTAP or a phonological awareness test that is more thorough than just one subtest on the KTEA or the Wyatt, it is pretty in-depth, and you need to have that experience and that sensitivity, I think, to be able to accurately score and hear those sounds.
Yeah, because she specifically asked me, because it was one of my speech kiddos, if it was an appropriate sound error. And I was kind of like, why did you administer this? And why was I not the one or the SLP? So, yeah, anyways, so I was just kind of wondering.
I think it's just a conversation that you should have, and moving forward, hey, I can do that too if you'd like me to.
Okay.
You know, because then if it is a student with our tick errors, I can really decipher that a little bit better or
Yeah.
differentiate if that's due to the disability or if that's due to that phonological impact.
Okay.
So, good question. What else? Yeah, and if, you know, I would encourage you moving forward too, that if this is an area that you want additional information as far as assessments or intervention, like what resources, what tools do we have? This can be an ongoing conversation within your PLC. I'm happy to support you. Like I had sent out in my email, we are doing PLCs a little bit differently. So if this is something that you within your small group feel like this is something you want to dig into, I'm happy to support and provide you with any of those resources as well. Okay, well, if anybody has any other questions, going once, going twice. All right, thank you so much, you guys. I hope to see you in person at some point over the next few weeks. And please do not hesitate to reach out with any follow-up questions regarding the information today, or if you even want to just kind of brainstorm or talk about how can we pull this into your building. I'm happy to talk through that. And if you need anything else, I'm here for you. So have a wonderful rest of your day and a great start to your year.